Hello everyone, James Donaldson here, and great ways to support us at the Contemporary Gentleman is by buying our Spy series. Link below, or our Patreon. If you want to see what we're doing between episodes, check us out on Instagram.
Go.
Alright, so stepping right into it, this is pretty easy. Gentleman's disclosure, we're talking about the Glock 40, which is the long slide 10mm Glock. Let's dig in. So what is a Glock 40? Well, let me tell you, it is a 10mm Glock that is longer than a Glock 20. So Glock 20 and 21 being roughly the same size, or the large frame variants, but they're very close to Glock 17, which is 9mm, and a Glock 22, which is 40 caliber. I should also add the Glock 21 as the 45 caliber. So this is a longer Glock 20, as I said, which is going to give you more velocity and more sight radius. So uses, why is this going to exist? Mainly it could be a hunting primary pistol or primary weapon in general. It could also be a backup, and then also be like a bear gun basically. So I've carried it with me to defend myself if need be against a bear, or really even as much a mountain lion. That's what a lot of people don't consider. Mountain lions are one of the only, if not the only animal that kills for fun, I guess, apart from humans. So, yeah, mountain lions, watch out. Anyway, next. So I wanted to talk magazines because, first and foremost, obviously, it's going to take the same magazines as the Glock 20. And so that's basically 15 round. Now, they do have 10 round magazines, which I own a few for when I go to Colorado, which is hopefully not as much anymore because they're communist. Just is what it is. But outside of that, I wanted to mention that I bought Lone Wolf extensions for my 15 rounders to hold 17 rounds. I think is what it is, 17, not 18. Anyway, I'm running it suppressed, which is pretty much all I do since getting the suppressor. Bad hang-ups. Bad hang-ups. I don't remember any issues running them without the suppressor, but I will tell you, I run the suppressed pretty much exclusively, and horrible issues. So I got rid of them. I probably threw them away. If I stored them, I don't know why. They're useless to me. So be advised on that. Next, MOS. So as an Optic host, I'm going to roll in some pictures here of some ridiculousness I was committing on this gun. Basically, it was less expensive to buy Vortex Crossfire than really any other pistol optic. So how did that go? Not well, because as you can see here, that optic is gone. Basically, I ordered this MOS plate. Surprisingly, I could not find, except for this one, a Glock MOS to Picatinny rail. Lone Wolf will do cuts into the slide, but they didn't sell a adapter or plate, whatever you want to call it. CHPWS, they didn't do it. So basically I bought this $20 piece, which I'm going to admit, only paying $20 made me nervous. However, the optic failed. I'm not entirely sure why, but the optic failed, which meant I had to take it off, and then I saw this marring, and basically the plate was not taking the abuse of having the optic to go along for the ride when this weapon would cycle. So thank you, Vortex, for the optic failure. Very much appreciate that. In their defense, that optic had done great on a 12 gauge. Granted, you're talking a bigger gun, heavier, so it absorbs the recoil better, and also it's stationary. It just moves with the gun. It doesn't move with the reciprocating parts. So putting it on this, especially the shitty plate, basically I would figure that while technically the optic could probably handle 10mm recoil, riding on this slide like this, it failed. And the malfunction was a disappearing dot. So I'd get it back, fire a couple rounds, gone. So I mean, I'm going to be totally honest. In Vortex's defense, I was using a product in a manner nearly other than directed. So, anyway, I don't know if their other pistol optics would be fine. I assume so, but I don't know for sure because I haven't tried it. So anyway, moving on. Sights. So I did Ameriglow, I did them raised, and did night sights. Basically, I mean, I'm just going to do night sights with one exception, iron sights, which I have on my home defense gun. Another video on that later. But here's the story, is I'm going to go to a Holosun 509T optic. It's ran great on my other pistols, which granted are 9mm, but I feel like with a CHPWS plate and the 509T, which is extremely durable, I think it'll be just fine on here. And if it's not, I'll buy an Acro probably. And then if that fails, I'll just give up and stick with iron sights. But the point being, coming back to iron sights, is these are ×2 height, and my irons for the 509T on my other Glocks are both ×3, and that's probably what I'd recommend. If I can find them, I'm going to roll in pictures, of course, of how it sits. And so I do love these sights. They're blacked out in the back, and then of course orange highlight in the front with the tritium, and that's what I'm going to stick with. I like that design very much. Now, if it wasn't an optic, I would probably have tritium in the back, just so I could line them up in the dark better. But since I'm probably going to be using a light, and let's see, what else? Well, using an optic, I really just, I don't like to cloud up that that sight picture, so I try to keep as little going on as possible. I have no problem with just the highlighted front and the tritium in my Conceal Carry Use. But that said, my nightstand gun does have just straight irons, nothing at all lighting them up. So, next. I would like to add that I only run higher optics, at least initially, because I was planning to put an optic on it. I don't really mind about looking over the can, because you really need, honestly, enormous sights. That said, I really like the look of the like ×9 Ameriglows that are just blacked out. And I mean, since I run the suppressed all the time, if I'm really not going to do an optic, so I don't care about that optic window, I would probably do something absurd like that. I think it just looks cool, and then it is going to allow me for a really good sight picture over the can. But shooting two eyes open, that really isn't that big a deal. So it'd really be more to be ridiculous than for function. So now, moving on. So let's talk suppression. I keep talking about suppressing this gun. Suppressors are becoming more common, as they should. I can't believe they're not considered common use yet, but we're getting there. So, anyway, why suppress it? Hearing protection, basically. I want it to be just... I want to hear everything, and I know there's... I can wear Ear Pro, okay, well then you're not aware of your surroundings. Okay, then wear the electronic Ear Pro. Are you kidding? I can just throw this thing on the gun and be ready to go and have natural, good hearing. I have excellent hearing. Somehow it got even better over time. I can't explain that. But, yeah, so, suppressor, how does it run? Well, obviously I use it for fun and recreational shooting as well as out in the woods. It runs great suppressed. It's 10mm. It's got the oomph to cycle. even if the booster malfunctioned, I've noticed. Because I've had booster issues, it gets dirty in there, just does. So, I fired a lot of rounds through this can. Review coming on the can. The can is a GM45. So, what you should know about this can is that it's monocore. That's probably one of the biggest things. So, that means it's lightweight, and it's unbalanced, which means it's balanced. So, we'll talk about this in the review. I can't get the sleeve off to show you the monocore. So, that said, just understand that there's basically one piece of metal underneath the sleeve. The sleeve threads off, comes off, and then it would just be a skeletal looking image. And so all the weight is right here in the booster housing, because you got the piston, you got the spring, you got all these parts coming together. So then the sleeve slides on. So because it's out of balance, meaning all the weight's back here, more weight of the suppressor is toward the front of the gun. So if there was more weight reaching out front, the perceived weight would be heavier than it is. So, is it a quiet can? No. I didn't think it would be hollered quiet. It's certainly not. But it is protecting my ears. And I'm not like some assassin dude, especially the 10mm, not some assassin dude trying to take people out. I'm just trying to not kill my hearing or hearing of those around me if I had to use this in the wilderness to defend my life or someone else's. That's all it is. So, is it kind of expensive hearing protection? Yes. Is it worth it? Yes. Also yes. So, sound attenuation, it does work better on deeper tones, I've noticed, because it helps change the tone, this particular silencer. So, 10mm versus 9mm, this does a better job on the 10mm than it does the 9. So, yeah, that's what I got. Caveats and variables. So, for ammo, I've probably only ever used Underwood ammo. Now I've kind of changed up the ones I'm using right now. I'm kind of doubling down on the hard cast, just because of the intended use. Does it have that like stellar, impressive numbers performance as some of the other rounds do? No. Is it a little less expensive? Yes. Is that why I bought it? No. In this case, because I don't shoot 10mm very often, I want to shoot the 10mm I'm going to use, and so price isn't that big a deal, because again, I'm not even shooting this gun monthly. So, no worries there. That said, the Underwood ammo, I use it because it's pretty much the hottest semi-spec ammo I can find. I was actually really disappointed. I'm a big Hornady fan, and many other big-time ammo manufacturers just don't have that hot ammo that 10mm is supposed to be. Most of it's juiced up 40, and what's the point in owning this gun if I'm not going to put true 10mm through it? I will also add that Underwood has a large selection of bullets categorized by use, even Lehigh defense ammo, which is really great. They're really great bullets, so that's another reason I would go with Underwood, is they've got quality stuff. Just because they're a lesser known company doesn't mean I'm going to look the other way, but I'm also not going to jump on board just because there's some niche company no one's heard of. They make good products, and that's why I buy it. So, let's talk about the weight and balance of the gun itself, right? So, the weight is good compared to other guns you'd carry in the wilderness. Let's talk about revolvers, 4.58 Cazul, 44 mag. Those are heavy guns, and they're carrying way less ammo. So, you get more rounds. Some people would say with the revolvers, don't miss. Okay, well let's talk about the reality of the scenario here. Your adrenaline is pumping, probably crazier than it would in a human-to-human self-defense scenario. A bear is charging at you. You should be ready to accurately put down as many rounds downrange as possible to stop that animal. And similar story with the mountain lion. And that is crazy. A lot of people aren't going to encounter animals like that. And I would do everything I could to avoid having to shoot an animal. I want to make that very clear. And I encourage other people to as well. This is a last-ditch effort to save my life or someone else's. So, in that event, I want to have as much firepower as possible. And this gun delivers on that. I would say the main rival now is the SIG P310, whatever they call their brand new 10mm. And I don't know much about it. I obviously haven't shot it, so I can't attest to it. But I will say that as far as having a semi-automatic gun with a lot of rounds, I know a lot of people would take this over those revolvers, even though those revolvers, those rounds, do have more power. This is more like really taking a .357 Magnum. But I will add that there's a group, of course I'm forgetting who they are, but there is a military that uses Glock 20s in case they run into polar bears. So if a Glock 20 is good enough for a polar bear, I think the Glock 40 is going to be fine with for whatever I run into in the woods. Back to balance, no, it does not balance as well as a 17L, which I have here. But the 17L has a cutout, and the Glock 40 does not. I appreciate that because the 17L to me is more of a fun gun. Because of that cutout, I think it'd probably run pretty good, but I just would fear debris getting into it. And sometimes it's shocking, even on a really excellent gun, how little debris it takes to jam things up. So the fact that it's closed, I'm sure they did that for the reason of this being an outdoors gun, so keeping debris out of the slide and away from the barrel. But either way, it still balances pretty good. It presents well, and really once you get a bunch of ammo in there, it kind of balances back out to where it's just a heavier gun, but in the grand scheme of things, it's not too terribly much heavier than my 17 that I carry here. So, on to the next. So next couple things, which kind of ironic. Reliability, outstanding. It's a Glock, let's be honest. Which I guess I say that, but also a video talking about how 17L needs rounds put through it, as initially it's unreliable. Not true of this. This is functioned just like all the other Glocks outside the 17L. No questions out of the box. Now, that said, I put a Lone Wolf slide stop, slide release, whatever you want to call it. Literally, whatever you want to call it, doesn't matter. And it just, initially it made it a little harder. Well, see, it still does it. It doesn't lock the slide back very well, especially when I push it up with my thumb. So when I get some laziness out of me and don't have something better to do, I'm probably going to swap back in the original. I'm not trying to talk trash on this review with Lone Wolf, because I've used some other products like their Alpha Wolf barrels, outstanding. A couple other things have been great, but as far as things I bought from them to use with this 10mm, I should have kept it stock. Luckily, the parts aren't expensive, which maybe is the problem, but yeah, should have saved that money. On to holsters. So, not many, and they're hard to find. Now, if you want an enclosed holster that covers the bottom, probably not with the barrel threaded, then Dara holsters is where you gotta go. I got one of those until I found out the way you get rid of the strap that's over it. I didn't like it. I hated it, honestly. So I got rid of it immediately. So I really never used it, sold it as new. But because of the dimensions match pretty much a Glock 20 or a Glock 21, Glock 41, basically any large frame Glock. As long as it's open in the front, this will slide right through. So even though it's longer, it'll just go through, and that'll be fine. And then you won't have to worry about finding a holster, especially if you already have a holster for one of those other guns. If you already have one of those other guns, then this can just work right with it, as its dimensions are the same. Now, suppressing it slash not, or just running it without a suppressor. So there are a few holsters. You may have seen my other videos where I talk about suppressed pistol holsters. So there's two that are basically the only ones that work for Glock 40. It's basically a large frame Glock, and they both happen to work without a suppressor. So if you don't have a suppressor, you're not going to use a suppressor, whatever the deal, and for some reason you don't, maybe you're not going to take this at Wilderness, I would, if I wouldn't have using a suppressor, I would probably use a different holster than those in the Wilderness. Now, for everything else, I think those holsters are just fine, and it just has to do with retention. In the Wilderness, I want as secure retention as I can get, because you never know if you fall or whatever. Now, it's a risk I'm willing to take because suppressing it is more important to me. Your ear protection is more important than my 99.9% trust in a holster versus a holster I trust 100%. Not trying to knock those holsters. They functionally do not have the same retention that a holster that encompasses the whole thing. Now, the holsters I'm talking about are the Hayden X300, the A and the B, which I have not mentioned in any of my suppressor holster videos because I'm going to do a video on it. It came out, or at least I found out about it way after I did any of those other videos. So, all of that having been said, the other one is the Armadillo X4V2, and that's really great too. It's just a little flimsier than the Hayden, so I'd probably recommend the Hayden. That said, I have not completed my testing of the Hayden, so I have used the Armadillo before in the wilderness, and it was great. So there we go. That said, I like the construction of the Hayden better, so as long as everything pans out, that'll be my recommendation. Now, I did try to run it in a homemade suppressor-friendly holster, and the gun fell out. So don't home-make your holsters if you're going to use them in a serious capacity. Now the length, holstering it suppressed, it is obviously enormous. The barrel itself is 6.5 inches. So, add in the suppressor, which I think this is about 7.5 before the lid, maybe, so probably around 9 inches here, and then you got all the back, so it hangs down pretty far on your side, so be aware of that. The holster, or the suppressor, isn't that heavy, and it kind of wags side to side still. You got some leverage, so things to consider. Now let's talk about the Glock 20 specifically versus the Glock 40. So a couple big things are going to be sight radius, obviously. I mean, you've got couple inches difference. Depending on how far away you're shooting, it might matter. Otherwise, it might not. That's for you to decide. The other thing is, this comes as an MOS. So, the length of this extra bit is really what you make it. If you put this stock next to a stock Glock 20, there's just 1.5 to 2 inches of length. That's all the difference. It's really not that much more unwieldy of a gun. Yeah, it's kind of harder to find a holster if you're not, especially if you're not going to suppress it, but it can be done. Like I said, T-Rex arms, Glock 20 holster. Granted, they don't have light compatible, which is a major complaint of mine, because I'd have bought one, would have bought 2 of them by now. T-Rex arms, if you're listening. So, outside of that, if you're wanting an MOS and you want a 10mm Glock and you want an MOS, get the 40. I would say that I think there's also better availability. I've seen a lot more 40s available than 20s. From what I've seen on Blue Label pricing, I pretty much only see 40s. I don't think I've ever seen a Glock 20 Blue Label. Now, I've had friends buy some crazy shit Blue Label, and I've seen some crazy stuff, like a factory threaded with some kind of raised night sights Glock 21 Blue Label. So there's some cool stuff you can buy Blue Label. Not saying there's no Glock 20s, but I haven't seen them. And I spent a little while looking for this gun, and I still kind of watch the market now. So that is what it is. Now, clearing leather is really the only difference this little length is going to make, especially if you have an enclosed holster. If you have one of those holsters that's open top, it makes no difference whatsoever. As soon as that light unseats, you can come up. And if anything, the suppressor is going to make it harder. Again, I've already listed my reasons for having it on there. Now, concealability is one more thing. You're going to look at the difference between the 20 and the 40. Are you really going to conceal a Glock 20? I've kind of said if I could only have one pistol, I'd probably get a Glock 20 because it'll do what I need to hiking, and of course it will work for self-defense, which we're going to talk about. But at the end of the day, you're probably not going to conceal a Glock 20. If you wanted to, then you should go that route. And then if you want an optic, get the slide milled. I don't know. Build one off a Lone Wolf. Although, I can't really... I've used their products, so I don't know if they suck or not. Anyway, that's kind of the main stuff between the Glock 40 and the Glock 20. Next. So I've already kind of talked about it, but putting this gun versus the bigger caliber guns, especially that you'd carry in the woods, practicability outside of just capacity. So yeah, I talked about capacity, practicability. A couple things going for this gun is, one, those revolvers. If you're not used to them, which you're probably not, that's a lot of people I know that carry big bore revolvers, they are just using them in the woods. And so, if at all, they practice with them, it's right before they go out. So again, you factor in adrenaline, you factor in a lot of things that are happening in a self-defense scenario. There are a lot of people that have fired those guns and made out just fine, especially hardly using those guns. I'm not saying that you can't be done. I'm just saying I like to optimize stuff as much as I can. So not only am I more likely to practice with this more than one of those big revolvers, but I hate the way revolvers feel. And this feels almost identical to a gun I carry every day and shoot a few times a month. So when it comes to the grip angle, the trigger pull, it is pretty much, for all intents and purposes, identical. In fact, this sits flatter because of the weight out in front. It's actually easier to hold it flat while I pull the trigger. So, basically, and the reason I love Glocks is when I'm practicing with one, it's like I'm practicing with all of them. And of course, Holosun 509. I'm going to have a Holosun 509 with the same Ameriglows on this gun. So it'll be all the more the same. So again, practicability. That's really a big thing for me and the things I do. My guns are tools. Really, the 17L is the only one that's kind of a gray area as far as a actual specific use for it. So there you have it. So let's talk shit hit the fan, SHTF. Probably don't recommend this. And the reason is ammo availability. So while, yeah, this can kill everything, you can probably explode a tank with it during a loss of rule of law scenario. No, I really, the guns I would use for shit hit the fan, without rule of law, all that, it would be common calibers. You can kill a deer with a 5.56. Pretty easily. So my guns would be a 9mm and a 5.56. And then if there was a second gun, it'd be a long rifle, probably my 6.5 Creedmoor. And that's just how it is. Outside of that, it is a great gun, but again, ammo availability, especially considering, I mean, you're probably gonna find, if you find any 10mm, Smith & Wesson 40 caliber. So you're probably not going to find, I'm not going to break into someone's house and find Underwoods all the time. So there's absolutely no reason to take this gun with me. So there we have it. Next. So as far as concealed carry use, right, and this kind of pertains more to the Glock 20 because I carry a full-size 17 these days. So I could carry a full-size 20. It'd be a little heavy, but I could do it. Now, that's why I don't recommend this gun or the Glock 20. 10mm. Again, it goes to the practicing, cost, all that. It's going to be a lot less expensive to practice with my 9mm than my 10. And the 9mm is just going to be easier to shoot. Now, maybe what you could do is take your Glock 20 or 40 out, go put 20 rounds down range, and switch to your 9, and that's going to feel all the more comfortable to shoot that gun. But yeah, I definitely recommend 9mm over 10mm for concealed carry use. Again, if I was to have only one gun, it's quite possible it would be a Glock 20. So I'm not saying don't carry one or conceal it. I just want you to think about these things. 9mm easier to control. As I said, ammo availability for practice and for carry. Ammo cost, of course, is another big one, especially these days. 9mm more than just does the job as far as humans. Thanks to technology, expanding bullets, all that kind of stuff, plus P, you can get a very stout 9mm round. There's a reason FBI and other groups are going back to the 9mm. There's a reason why so many people carry it these days. It just is. So the other thing is, I want you to consider this, is 10mm is way louder than 9mm. I've fired 9mm without ear protection outside, and it's not the worst thing. Be worse, of course, in enclosed spaces or in an alley, something like that, but 10mm is always going to be way worse. And so I do this thing where I fire every gun I have at least once, unsuppressed, without hearing protection. Because if I ever had to do it, I want some level of familiarity. So, there you have it. Now, the rest of the time, suppressed without ear pro or with ear pro, unsuppressed always with ear pro, that's just how it goes. But my 9mm has been fired a few times without hearing protection for various reasons, and so I know that it is a lot quieter than 10mm. Just saying. So if you think about, I have kids. There's always a chance I'm with my family if I have to use my weapon in a self-defense capacity. I don't want to damage everyone else's hearing and mine, or I want to damage it as little as possible. 0 would be great, but there's no way to carry a fully suppressed pistol yet, at least for me. Don't go crazy about Maxim 9s and things like that. I get it. Not going to happen for me. So, anyway, that's it. I don't recommend 10mm or this gun or the Glock 20 for concealed carry. We're almost done here. The cost. If you're a Blue Label user, this is a really, really good price. To me, if I can only have 2 guns, right, so we'll go away from the one gun thing. People like to say, well, if you can only have 1 gun. If I could have 1 gun between my 17 and my Glock 40, it's going to be my 17. Just for realistically what I'm doing every day and how I'm doing it, it's going to be 17. Maybe I could take down a mountain lion with this anyway. Probably not a bear, maybe a mountain lion. But let's be real, I haven't been to Colorado in a few years, whereas I used to go at least once a year, and that's when I bought this. So, this is real. Now 2 guns, 9mm and a 10mm all day long. I would have a 10mm before another 9mm, depending on my situation. For me, and the way my situation is, it's going to be a 9 and 10mm. I go back and forth if I would actually do a Glock 20 or not, and I just keep reminding myself that for what I'm doing, there's absolutely no point. Because if I wanted to make this smaller, I could get rid of the suppressor, I could put the non-threaded barrel back on, I could put the stock sights on, I could put the panel back on from Glock, and then it's just slightly longer than a Glock 20. So, the close. In the end, the Glock 40 is a well-made but still utilitarian gun. Of course, all Glocks being the same, the 10mm chambering is half of that equation. I've hiked with it in the woods and in the mountains with no regrets due to weight. In fact, no regrets at all. While its primary purpose serves as a wilderness gun, it certainly has its place in personal defense or even duty. That said, it wouldn't be my first choice, as the irony of this gun is the 10mm cartridge helps its relevance as much as it hurts it. This has been James Donaldson with the Contemporary Gentleman. Until next time, keep your composure.